Alright, what is up everybody? This is Alex once again with another EOT Newsflash Extra Newsflash thing. This is going to be a tournament report and deck tech that I decided to do after a really awesome weekend down in Waco for a PPTQ that was kind of a last minute decision to actually go to. For anybody who's listened to last episode knows that I'm going to be leaving the state pretty soon and wasn't going to have another shot at one of these with my group of friends, Shawn, James, everybody else who's been on the show before. So I decided to do this last minute go, just basically to hang out with them, jam some Magic, and play some Eldrazi, because I finished the deck up just last week. So this would be the deck tech to kind of start off things, and we'll go into the tournament report. But yeah, this was the second time I'd actually played the deck itself. I played it at F&M the Friday before and basically audibled into it the next morning. My other option was going to be Jund, but I wanted to kind of go with a bang, and what's bigger than going with Eldrazi essentially. So real quick rundown of the deck tech. There's a couple of cards here that I'll point out as just kind of being maybe questionable, and we'll get to why here in a second. But the mana base is pretty much as it is in every other Eldrazi deck. You've got the 4 Cavern of Souls, the 4 Eldrazi Temple, just your basic mana base, the brush lands, and your Evan Coast provide you with plenty of colorless mana. Just a pretty stock mana base that I've never really had an issue with getting mana at the right time. Just, it is what it is. Moving over to our creatures, 2 Birds of Paradise is a little bit curious, mostly because I didn't have the second and the third and fourth Noble Hierarchs. So I put a 2-2 split, and also I thought, well, maybe this might come up where I might have to put engineered explosives on a number that I just can't hit off my current mana, or maybe I wanted to actually cast the Dismember without dealing 4 points of damage to myself. That never actually came up, but it was there just because I needed it, and I got to play my super sweet revised bird, which got some compliments actually, so I was happy about that. Drowner of Hope, Eldrazi Displacer is probably the most stupid card in the deck, and we'll get to a match here in a little bit during the tournament report where it absolutely won the game on its own, and we'll get to talk about that in a little bit. The Eternal Witness, this is a little bit of tech that some of my friends and I have been kind of going back and forth on. It's just a really solid value creature, and if you can blink with Eldrazi Displacer, you're in pretty good shape to start looping your spells that you've lost, whether it's a creature or a fetch land you desperately need, or getting back a land. It's just a really solid creature to have, and I'm considering maybe playing more of them, but right now I like 1's where it's at. 3 Matter Reshaper, it's gonna go to 4 as soon as I cut one of the suspicious cards in the deck. Just a good solid beater that's always gonna get you value most of the time. The Noble Hierarchs, again, it's 4 now. After I picked up my prize winnings, I put 2 more in the deck. 4 Reality Smasher is the best card in the deck. 2 Spell Sky. It's for shutting down so many of the other decks right now. Infect, Bogles, even Burn. It's great against. Thought Not Seer. This card is also very stupid. Play it on turn 2 off of a Eldrazi Temple and one of your 1x mana accelerators. Absolutely fantastic. Moving into our spell package, we've got the 1 Dismember, which probably doesn't need to be in the deck anymore. I don't think it's worth the spot. I boarded it out quite often in a lot of my matchups. 4 Path to Exile, just pretty solid stock removal. Engineered Explosives is a house in this deck because it fights against so many different decks in the format right now, whether it's Merfolk, even Jund and Abzan fall to it. Affinity, it just cripples it all together. Bogles, it just cripples. Super powerful card, and the fact that you can get it off your Ancient Stirrings just makes it that much better. Like, the best part about this deck is that Ancient Stirrings is almost a tutor for any card in your deck, as long as it's in the top 5 cards, because you can just always go and get what you want with it. It's not your best turn 1 play. Your best turn 1 play is always going to be one of your 1 mana accelerators, Birds of Paradise, or Noble Hierarch, depending on the build you're playing. Because that way you always have the ability to play a 4-drop on turn 2 if you have the correct lands, or even if they kill it and you have the correct lands, correct creatures and cards in your hand, you can still play a 3-drop on turn 2 with the setup of it being correct. But second best turn 1 play in the game, especially if you're looking for a particular piece. The one card that I'm going to get some flack for, and I got flack for it all throughout the tournament, is the one of Lead the Stampede. If you don't remember this card, it's from Scars of Mirrodin. Mirrodin Siege, I believe, was the set it was from. 2 and a green sorcery. I'll pull it up there for you. I apologize not being able to get the entire card on the screen. Sorcery, look at the top 5 cards of your library and you may reveal any number of creatures among them and put those into your hand. The rest go on your bottom and in the order you have, in a random order, of course, or in the order that you're choosing. The idea was that as being so creature dense, you would hit a pretty good amount of the time. On the drive down, Shawn and I did some numbers, crunched the math out, and it turns out to be about 1.5 creatures per cast of Leave the Stampede. We'll get to what it actually did in the tournament here in a minute. But that's the main board. It's just a super resilient mid-range value deck that has some stupidly explosive starts. I got to play the old blue-white version back when Ivan was still legal in the format. That deck was dumb. This deck is also dumb. It is absurdly powerful in the metagame right now, and I really hope we don't lose any more pieces to any more bannings because it has been doing very well in the metagame as of late. Let's move over to the sideboard. We've got 1 Blessed Alliance, 2 Chalice of the Void, Elspeth, Sun's Champion, Graphiger's Cage, a Negate, a Rest in Peace, 2 Stony Silence, 2 Stubborn Denial, a Thrag Tusk, a Worldbreaker, and a Worship. A couple of the cards that stood out from the weekend. Blessed Alliance was a great one as always. Elspeth, Sun's Champion. When I had it in my hand and almost was about to cast it, the game was going to end, but I just ended it too soon. I broke reality, as it were. The 2 Graphic Cages are great against the Jeskai Nahiri decks right now. Any deck that's trying to abuse its graveyard. Negate's just a good solid piece of counter magic against certain decks. Rest in Peace kind of goes with Graphiger's Cage in terms of getting things exiled from the graveyard that's not going to come back. Stony Silence against Affinity. Stubborn Denial, a powerhouse of a card, and I'll get to the matchup that it was most important in. Thrag Tusk for the control matchups and sort of the burn matchup as well. Worldbreaker, just another good solid threat that's going to consistently eat an artifact, an enchantment, or a land. And the MVP of the entire sideboard, Worship. We'll get to that one in a couple of games as we go through the tournament report. But this card is absolutely stupid, and I don't think I'm going to be cutting it anytime soon. So let's jump right into the tournament report. I have all my notes right here, so if I am looking down a lot, it's because I'm trying to read. But yeah, it was last weekend, so that was September the 10th, down in Waco, Texas, at the Game Closet. Fantastic shop down there. Great big play space. Really great staff down there, so big shout out to them. But my first round opponent was a buddy of mine, Cody, who was on Jeskai Nahiri, and I thought it was really funny that he was playing the deck that I was playing just last week and doing terribly with. Game 1 kind of went the way it does when you don't find Cavern of Souls. Games 2 and 3, a little bit better when you find Cavern of Souls. Just being able to have Cavern on Eldrazi and constantly stick your threat and make him respond to each of them, because it's got to be a Path to Exile, it's got to be a Supreme Verdict, it's got to be a Nahiri Exile. You've got to stop these creatures, in probably the slowest ways possible. His bolts don't do anything anymore. Lighting Helix doesn't do anything anymore. I've played the Jeskai Nahiri deck, and it's an abysmal matchup when your opponent is just jamming threat after threat after threat. They'll leave the Stampede, hit 3 out of 5, and I cast it in game 1, so that was pretty sweet. Emrakul is a huge threat in the metagame right now. If it gets cast on you, you're kind of in trouble. Unfortunately, Drowner of Hope just kind of ruins Emrakul's plans every single time. Just tapping it down is the best thing in the world, and that's what let me win game 3 and completely take the match at that point. Great way to start off the tournament. Both Shawn and Ivan were actually also on Bant Eldrazi, so we're just kind of like, keeping an eye on each other's matchups and figuring out, where we would have gone wrong. We were watching each other constantly play, so it was a really cool feeling to have your teammates on a similar deck, or almost the exact same deck except for a couple of cards in a few cases, and actually be able to watch and comment on plays and think about sideboarding after matches were over. Round 2 was against Burn, and this was a matchup I was not very comfortable with to begin with, but it actually turned out pretty well. Got game 1, lost game 2 to a quick pair of Goblin Guides and some burn spells. Game 3 got interesting. I went to fetch on my opponent's instep, and a card fell out of my deck. And I was like, oh shoot, that must have been in my hand. I picked it up, and it was a Reality Smasher that was not in my hand of 4 cards. And unfortunately, I picked it up and put it in my hand, not realizing it, and immediately had to call a judge on myself. It's a hidden card error. It's no longer the game loss that it used to be, thank goodness. But effectively, my opponent got to Thoughtseize my hand for free and take a card out of it, shuffle my library, and go on from there. Problem being is that he took the Blessed Alliance that I had brought in that was going to effectively win the game for me as soon as he made his next attack. Unfortunately for my opponent, the Thoughtseize card went into my deck, and the card I drew from my turn was Stubborn Denial. And so when I made my attack and played my creature, he only assumed I only had 1 mana left over to cast nothing effectively. And he goes for a Lightning Helix post-combat on his turn to take out my Thought-Knot Seer and potentially draw a card to win the game. I had a Stubborn Denial, and that was an immediate scoop. The card is unreal when you get to trigger that Ferocious ability on there. So fantastic card. Super, super close matchup. One that I feel a little bit more comfortable with now, just because of the sideboard play and just how fast the deck can actually get out ahead of your opponent. Round 3 was my only loss during the Swiss. This was against Abzan mid-range, more of Bird's Paradise, Noble Hierarchs, and on Offensive Foremost, the 3-color one from Khans of Tarkir. Super aggressive starts both games. Behind pretty much turn 1, could never get a good stable mana base down and start casting my spells. Really awkward hands. He just blew me out in 2 games. It happens. Round 3 was against Jund, a matchup that I figured and assumed from reading an article by Todd Stevens and a lot of other people writing about Bant Eldrazi online was going to be a great matchup for me. After game 1, and I got to just be able to run out turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer, turn 3 Reality Smasher. That was pretty much the game, and I was feeling pretty good about it. Game 2 went a little bit worse for me. My opponent just being able to chain together a couple of Tarmogoyfs, some Scavenging Uses, and just some pretty cheap discard and removal, just kind of shredded my game plan apart. Lost to that pretty quickly. Game 3 got nuts, and it was probably the best game I got to play all weekend just because of how absurd this actually got. We both kind of got out to a rough start. I started falling behind very, very quickly. He had all the removal spells. He had Maelstrom Pulse for double Thought-Knot Seer, drawing him 2 cards, absolutely backbreaking. And I finally got to a position where I was able to make some 1/1s off of Drowner of Hope. I'm thinking, okay, I can tap down his guys, maybe swing for the win here in a minute, and hopefully that's good enough. He had to terminate for the Drowner of Hope. I'm thinking, this is terrible. So I was finally able to draw another creature and play, I forget what it was specifically, it might have been Rat Matter Shaper, but I had that and Worship in my hand. I boarded it in, kind of thinking it might do something and hoping it wasn't going to get Thoughtseized or Maelstrom Pulsed. And so I played it and just was like, all right, this has to work. If he kills off my creatures, if he's got Anger the Gods in his deck, or if he has any removal for my Scions, I'm just dead. And it worked. I was able to sit behind these 2 tokens and the Matters for so long, just take beat after beat after beat, getting beat down by a Thrun, a Raging Ravine, Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Uses. I was just getting pummeled. I'm just like, I'm not losing any life because these tokens are sitting here just laughing. And I was laughing with them. Like, this is amazing how this card is just keeping me in this game. I should have lost 5 turns ago. Until I finally found a second copy of Drowner Hope and an Eldrazi Displacer to assemble the Infinite Blink combo, essentially. And I was going to be able to tap down his entire team for a majority of the turns and just swing in for the win. Absolute relief. I was able to beat that matchup. It felt really 50-50, and he just kept drawing haymaker after haymaker, and finally was able to pull ahead and get the game. So a huge relief there. So at that point, we were sitting 3-1, still feeling pretty good for top 8. Expecting to be able to draw at some point and hopefully get in on that. Round 5 was against Through the Breach, the Valakut deck with Primeval Titan, Emrakuls, and things like that. Crushed it game 1. The deck did what it's supposed to do. Turn 1 Accelerator, turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer, turn 3 Reality Smasher, and just took it down. Game 2 got turn 5 Emrakul. No big deal. It happens. Game 3 had the exact same start from both of us, it felt like. Just smashers, Thought-Knot Seers, tearing his hand apart, and he, and on his turn 5, he just looks at me, he's like, all right, this is it, and he jams it Through the Breach into my 1 of a mana, and I had the Stubborn Denial that time, and he just picked up the Emrakul, put it back in his hand, put the Through the Breach back into the graveyard, and I was like, all right, here we go. Untapped. Found the last couple of lands I needed. Was able to have both Thought-Knot and Reality Smasher in play. Played a Drowner of Hope in case he had it again to be able to tap the Emrakul down with the ability of Drowner, and took the game. And at that point, I was locked in. We were all assuming that we were going to be able to draw into top 8, because usually an X1-1 record is good enough. things didn't go so smoothly at that point because we were looking at the point spread. The difference between, I believe we were the 10 or 11 pointers at some point, I can't remember exactly. There was less than a 13% change between the high and the low. So we were all locked in pretty much at the exact same point, which meant we all had to play. Ivan was lucky and didn't have to play. He was basically undefeated going into it. Shawn and I were a little bit shaky. Fortunately, we didn't have to play each other. That would have been the worst. So we basically had to say, okay, if Ivan wins his match, we can draw on at that point. If he loses, then we have a problem. And if he draws, we also have a bigger problem. So fortunately, he was able to draw it, and that was showing us that we were both able to play our matches and win, which actually was happening. We both won our matches, and then Ivan saw that, so then he was able to draw without affecting his percentage points. So I played against Bogles, which I was not sure about being able to beat. His first land was Razor Verticate, and I thought it was the same guy that had sat next to earlier who's playing Green White Summoning Trap until he played the Galactic Scout on turn 1, and I realized I was in real trouble. I had already mulliganed to 5 and had about, I think, 6 card hand, 3 lands and some creatures. I wasn't able to cast anytime soon, and my first draw is Spellskite. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be great. So I was able to jam the Spellskite on turn 2 after I took a couple hits, and the next draw was Engineered Explosives. Put it on 1, my opponent immediately scooped. I was like, yes! It's a great way to start out a game against a pretty difficult deck, I would say. So we boarded in the Blessed Alliance. I think we brought in Chalice of the Void to stop his enchantments, and it was just ready to just battle again. Brought in Worship, which came in incredibly handy in this matchup. Basically what happened, he lands a turn 2 Stony Silence, and I'm thinking, shoot, there goes the Explosives and the Spellskite. I didn't bring in Worldbreaker because I wasn't sure it was going to be fast enough. I was kicking myself for not doing that. I might find some room for a Coax from the Blind Eternities at some point in this deck, because sometimes you just need a big old beater that's not in your deck. Maybe we'll think about that one. And so in the meantime, he's been able to suit up his Hexproof guy with the Pro Creature +1/+1 Spirit Mantle. He got down did a Coronet and was just ready to pummel me to death. I was going to lose this game very, very quickly. And then I drew Worship. And I slammed it. I'm like, if he's got the enchant removal, we're dead. And he just calmly just taps the green mana. I'm thinking, well, here it goes. This is going to be Nature's Claim. I'm going to gain 4 life and then just lose next turn. It was Natural State, the new enchantment hate from Oath of the Gatewatch, which destroys a enchantment 3 converted mana costs or less. Worship is safe from it. So I'm thinking, okay, we're safe for now. Maybe he's got it in his sideboard and just hasn't drawn it yet. Fingers crossed. So I just pass the turn and we just start playing the game. He just slaps on more and more enchantments. He's getting this thing up to 12, 13, 13. It was getting enormous. And of course, I'm just not blocking. He at one point gained up to 100, I think, and 60 something life. I'm just like, well, eventually I'm going to find Blessed Alliance and be able to kill this thing and just start chomping in for damage. In the meantime, I finally found Thought-Knot Seer and was able to strip a card out of his hand. Then I found Eldrazi Displacer, and we both had amassed such a huge amount of mana that I was able to enable the other pseudo-infinite combo in the deck, which is blinking Thought-Knot Seer with Eldrazi Displacer. And if you don't know how this interaction works, since the Eldrazi Displacer blinks it and returns it at exactly the same time, you put 2 triggers on the stack from Thought-Knot Seer. The leaves the battlefield, which prompts the player, your opponent to draw a card, and the returns the field. When it enters the battlefield, you look at your opponent's hand, take your card out of their hand. And basically what I was able to assemble at that point was stacking the triggers thus that the look trigger went first, and then the draw card trigger for your opponent went on top, so you had this resolved in that order. So your opponent would draw a card, then you would look at their hand, and take that card out of it. And you could do this effectively infinitely as long as you had mana available to do with it. And he realized that is basically how the Bant Eldrazi deck mills you out. So, scooped to that point, and at that point I realized that we were locked in for top 8. My first PPTQ I'd really played in a very long time with a brand new deck I'd never touched before. We were in top 8. I was super excited. And round 1 of top 8 was against Affinity, a deck I'd wanted to play against all day because I thought I had such a good matchup. Or so I thought. Round one, or game one, goes completely abysmally, and my hand was kind of slow. He had double Steel Overseer and was just able to crunch my life total down super quickly. Not a chance. Game two, beat down super quickly. I was able to stop his assault and then ripped in a Reality Smasher, played it, slammed it for 10 points of damage, into the game right there. Game three is where things just got stupid, and is the reason why I've got Mr. Eldrazi Displacer here on the screen with me, because he's my new best friend. He's the best card in this whole deck, and he's absolutely retarded. Why Wizards didn't put a tap on him to activate his ability is beyond me, but thank God they didn't. Because he was on the board all by himself. I had 12 mana at one point from a combination of Eldrazi Temples and other lands, and my opponent had been able to assemble Arcbound Ravagers, Ornithopters, all of the the knuckleheads from Affinity, and I was able to blink them all every combat step. Even though he had the cranial plating, it was just, all right, I'm going to tap all my mana, blink, 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 blink. They'll come to play tapped. I don't take any damage, and I just sat there for the longest time, just stopping my opponent completely and just chipping in for 3 points of damage a turn, until finally just like, that's it, I can't do it. And if he had drawn Galvanic Blast at any point in the game, I would have lost on the spot. But it's just the ability for this thing to blink anything. It'll reset the counters on anything that Steel Overseer's put on it. If something's got a bunch of counters from an Arcbound Ravager, they're gone immediately. This stupid little creature right here with this little pointy hat thing. It's like, what are you doing? You're the best thing ever, and I love you. So that was that. Super relieved that win that first matchup. Never saw the rest of the Stony Silence, which, whatever. It just goes to show that sometimes you don't need your silver bullets to win the game. You just need a little pointy-headed monster to blink your opponent's entire team. Match 2 of the top 8 was a rematch against the Abzan deck, so I was already a little bit worried until I smashed him game 1. Just smashed. Reality Smasher, Thought Seer, just smashed. Both of the games we played, unfortunately my opponent was a little bit flooded on mana, so not the best showing on his side of things, but just it was a relief to be able to fight back against a matchup that I felt so disadvantaged against after losing to him in the Swiss rounds. Game 2 of that I guess would be the semifinals. We both mulliganed to 5, and we're both just laughing our asses off. We both started out on Birds of Paradise, trying to find mana, trying to find anything to keep going and play the game. He floods out on mana again. I'm drawing nothing but creatures. I'm like, come on, Eldrazi Temple somewhere. And finally we ripped it, and I just I'll play creatures turn after turn and just beat into his Noble Hierarchs and his Birds of Paradise, and finally took it down. Super excited to be able to win that matchup. This plays are also a huge MVP. We're moving some Voice of Returner's tokens to get through for the last points of damage. Again, this card is nuts. Why doesn't it tap? It's beyond me. So going into the finals, I made a mistake, and it's really just because I didn't know what the situation was. Like I said, if you listen to last week's episode, you know I'm going to be leaving the state very, very soon for work, and I just didn't know if I was going to be able to even play in the RPTQ. I just had no idea. I didn't know that you could play in different states. I wasn't informed enough. I didn't have all the information to make a correct decision. So I scooped. I was just like, you know what? You care about it more than I do. A guy named Brandon Taylor. We always sit across from each other at the players' meetings, just because that's how it works. I don't know why. But I just said, you know what? You want it more than I do. I don't even know if I can go. I'll let you have it. And he was on Affinity, a matchup I was feeling pretty good about, but I just thought, you know what? I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to go. Turns out there is a RPTQ 2 hours away from my new city in Florida. So I just didn't know. And, that's been on my shoulders for a while. People are saying, why didn't you battle? Whatever. It's my own darn fault for not completely understanding the situation at hand. But if I learned anything from this experience, it's always battle. Always battle. Even if there's just the slightest chance that you can go. So do I regret not battling in the finals? A little bit. I was happy to get the the massive amount of store credit that picked up some cards from some other modern decks and a ton of Eldritch Moon and Shadows packs. So I was ready to crack into and already made a mess of my apartment with earlier this week. But yeah, I do regret not battling in a sense. It's definitely something I'm gonna carry with me every time I go play one of these. Is that you never say no to a battle. You went down there to fight, and you made it to the finals. You owe it to yourself to battle. So if you're in a situation like I was last weekend, where you're thinking, maybe I don't need to battle, just do it. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your teammates that were there with you. You owe it to your opponents. Make them fight for it. And so I definitely regret not battling. But for next time, now that I know that you can go anywhere for your PPTQ, and there are plenty across the world, that it's always been an option for me to battle now. And I'm always going to battle now, so take that to heart. So that does it for the deck tech and the tournament report. I'm going to touch on a couple of quick things here. In terms of the deck itself, leave the Stampede, gotta go. Fourth Matter Shaper, get in there. Dismember, get out of there. Looking for another good solid card. Maybe it's a fifth Mana Accelerator, maybe it's the first Birds of Paradise, maybe it's a second Internet Explosives. I'm not quite sure yet. As far as the sideboard goes, definitely want more Blessed Alliances. The Chalice of the Voids are a little bit unwieldy just because it's hard to kind of discern where they need to be put on. Against some decks where you want it on one, you're shutting down your Ancient Stirrings, your Paths, and your Mana Accelerators. So it's probably not the best spell. Being able to put in another Blessed Alliance and just another value card is probably going to be better than both of them were. I am thinking about working on a Naya version of this deck, basically cutting the blue for red spells, because Ancient Stirrings can go and get Cosmic's Return and also Crumble the Dust out of the sideboard, which for the matchups against Valakut decks is super important. Going to be testing that here in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure if it's going to be good enough. The red Eldrazi just aren't as good as the blue Eldrazi are. Drowner of Hope is a huge boon to this deck. Very, very powerful. Great with Eldrazi Displacer. So that's kind of where I'm thinking right now with the deck. I absolutely love playing a deck. Both Ivan and Shawn made top 8 with me from this weekend. So it was great to go down with some buddies of mine for the last go-around, for the last run of PPTQs. I'll probably get to play in here in Texas and just crush it with some of my friends. So we were Eldrazi Squad all weekend. I have a sweet crown that I forgot to put on, actually, so I feel kind of bad about that. But the deck is great. If you're looking to play a fair deck in Modern right now, I cannot recommend this one enough. Just tons and tons of aggressive lines you can take, and also it's got some late game power that can just push you over the edge. Great deck to play. I highly recommend it. And of course, let me know what you guys think about the deck in the comments as well. If you've had an experience, maybe playing a different version of this. Maybe it's the Naya version. Maybe you've played a Sultai version, or just or a Temur version of this deck, because there's a lot of play to this deck. I think you can make some really cool builds of it. And by no means is this, the stock list, I don't think. I think there's room for improvements, and I'm going to be experimenting with that. So, with that, we're going to bring this whole thing to a close. Let me know if you like the deck in the comments. Let me know if you guys want to see more of these deck techs and tournament reports in the future. I'll be planning on doing plenty more of these. Check us out this week over on MTGCast. We're going to be going over all the new Kaladesh spoilers. Holy cow, the inventions. I'm going to gush on those plenty more. I'm not going to do it right now and, spoil that fun for me on Wednesday this week. But go and check that out. All the links to all the social medias and the show notes, so check all that out as well. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see y'all next time.